a world where conferences didn't exist in the NBA, that means no Eastern Conference, no Western Conference, and by the time we got to the playoffs, that means only the top 16 teams make it to the NBA playoffs, which is the way it really should be. Now, also try to imagine with that by the time we get to the playoffs, the NBA guys don't just randomly start picking off players from important series that we want to see. And especially from the Los Angeles Clippers, because at this point, I'm really inclined to believe that they actually are cursed. Well, we're going to be using our imagination for all of this today to predict what would happen if the 2017 NBA playoffs were played without conferences. What's up, NBA fans? Dom2K on the mic, and it's been a pretty interesting 2 weeks of the playoffs, and I really can't complain. That is except for the fact that damn near everybody got injured in the first round, and they were some really important players. However, we're not here to complain about all the injuries because it's a lot more fun to look at what this playoffs would look like and how it would possibly finish if there was no conferences. Now, if you aren't familiar with this argument, you should really go check out the video I made a very long time ago about why I think conferences should be eliminated. I pretty much still stand by everything I said in that video, with the exception of talking about traveling, because I have looked up some more things about traveling and how that affects players, and that could be a pretty big issue, and that's probably why this is never going to happen, because if you had West and East teams playing each other, having them play each other as frequently as the East teams and the West teams do in the regular format, then it would probably, it really might end up a problem. So definitely just go check that video out if you're new to my channel. And yeah, you know, just fair warning, the audio is probably not that great in that video because I was using my old raggedy Turtle Beach headset back then, so I've come up since then. Anyways, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right into it. First things first, as has already been mentioned in the video, this is the top 16 teams, meaning it doesn't matter where you ranked in your conference. If you have a top 16 record in the NBA, you're in the playoffs this season. In this particular season, that doesn't change anything. Nobody gets booted out. The Blazers still make the playoffs, even though we had a really tight running for it, because we had 3 teams in the NBA finish 41-41. In the year 2017, this means that nothing changes. We still get 8 West teams and 8 East teams, despite the change of it being the top 16 teams in the NBA. I point that out because in other years that probably would have been drastically different. Very unsurprisingly, this bracket looks extremely different than the one we would get today, and you can see that as soon as you go to the 1/16 matchup where you have the Warriors and Chicago Bulls. Looking down, you would actually get the 8-9 matchup, which would mean instead of seeing the Wizards in the Eastern Conference Finals like is very possible this year, the Cavaliers would have to face the Washington Wizards in the first round. Because they performed so poorly throughout the end of the season, yeah, it was good enough to get them second in the East, but it was only good enough to get Cleveland 8th in the actual NBA, so they would have to fight some. They would have a very tough path to the NBA Finals this time. Then you go down to the 4-13 matchup, and that's where you're going to get Boston Celtics and Milwaukee. The 5-12 matchup would be fairly lackluster because you're going to have the Clippers and the Hawks. I'm not really sure that that's something anybody would be interested in seeing. But then we actually get to have some fun because in the 3-14 matchup, this is where you get to see James Harden and the Rockets take on Paul George and the Pacers. Now, I'm going to get into the matchups. I'm going to save that. But just to show you, this is why I always argued that we should go to this, because players that we're likely never going to see play each other in the playoffs, you get this kind of stuff in the first round. Obviously, the Rockets are the better team, but don't tell me you wouldn't be very entertained by a series with James Harden and Paul George in it. Obviously, we've got good enough right now with Westbrook and Harden. That's been very fun, but that's not going to happen every year, and having this type of playoff format really kind of promotes these matchups to happen. And check out how gorgeous this 6-11 matchup is between the Jazz and Grizzlies. If you haven't been watching the playoffs, you wouldn't understand, but if you have been watching, you would know that these two teams are very exciting. The Grizzlies might not be able to score that much, but they're giving the Spurs a run for their money, and the Jazz, even before they lost Rudy, when they did lose Rudy Gobert, they still beat the Clippers that night. So this is a really good team. Those are two very good teams, and that would be an entertaining series. You move down, you get the Raptors and Thunder, and of course you get the Spurs and Blazers after that. So I'm not going to do these like my conference prediction videos where I break every matchup down to its smallest detail to see who would win. Rather, we're just going to kind of look at these teams with a common sense approach, try to see who would win and who wouldn't, because this is just kind of simulating hypothetical matchups if this bracket did exist. Also, for the duration of this video, we're going to pretend that the NBA gods don't hate us and there's going to be no injuries. So we're not coming into the playoffs. Rondo was healthy in the Bulls. The Clippers still have Blake Griffin. Yeah, and we're going to go from there. So the 1/16 matchup is fairly common sense. You get the Warriors and Bulls, and obviously with both teams healthy, even though the Bulls had Rondo out there dominating little Isaiah Thomas, that is not going to be the case here, and the Warriors are going to move on in this series. However, I do want to say that's one of the advantages of this kind of bracket, because teams are going to be fighting for that first seed, and you're not going to have people resting down the stretch, because whoever gets the first seed truly, well, not in this year, we're going to get to that in a minute, not in this case, but most of the time, if you get that first seed, you have the easiest path to the NBA Finals. As as you can see, if you're in the 1 seed here, you're playing the 16th team, the last place team in the NBA, or in the NBA playoff race. So here the Warriors get the Bulls, and although the Bulls did turn out to be pretty good with Rondo, we all know the Warriors are going to win that series. That's going to be fairly easy for them. Now, the consequences of doing what Cleveland did this year, where they basically just rested down the stretch, they gave up the seed, they didn't really try, they're going to have to face Washington in this first round. Now, although I've already said in my prediction video, I think the Cavaliers would beat them, that goes against what they try to do and what LeBron teams try to do every year, because you see he likes to get rid of these first rounds as quickly as possible, so he's rested up while the rest of these teams are out here beating each other up. That's not really the case. I don't think they sweep Washington. We might come back here in a couple of weeks, I might be wrong, but I think that's actually a pretty tough series, and maybe you would be fighting to avoid a team like that so you can get a higher seed. This would make the regular season very interesting for that reason alone. But anyways, the Cavaliers are going to advance, and yeah, we're going to come up to that. We're going to come back up to that matchup in a minute because I have something to say about that. So then you have the Celtics and Bucks, and the Celtics, they got their card pulled against the Bulls. They got to the playoffs, and we found out very quickly that Boston, just like I said in my Eastern Conference prediction video, they are not a true first seed. They're the most vulnerable first seed ever, and I specifically said they could lose to almost any team in that conference, maybe with the exception of like the Pacers. And you see right now the series is 2-2 with the Chicago Bulls, but make no mistake about it, I think if there were no injuries, Boston might be sitting home right now in a 0-4 sweep. So in this hypothetical matchup where the Bucks play the Celtics, I think the Bucks would probably beat them. I'm just gonna go with what I wanted to say in my Eastern Conference prediction video. I said that, you know, pretty much any team out there has a chance to beat them. I think the Bucks would in this hypothetical matchup. You would think I've learned my lesson about trusting the Clippers in the playoffs by now, but I'm really thinking that in a series against the Hawks, I trust them to at least get that done. Dwight Howard is nowhere near what he used to be. I understand the Hawks defense is pretty good. They're not a terrible team, but I'm going to trust that healthy, they could probably beat the Hawks because they're tied with the Jazz right now. I think they could beat Atlanta. The Rockets are definitely going to beat the Pacers because I saw in that series that the Pacers really didn't seem like they had basic knowledge of how to guard a pick and roll, and yeah, blowing that lead against the Cavaliers, the Rockets got that. Harden is going to the second round. And the Jazz and Grizzlies, now that is such a toss-up because these are two teams, just like I said, the Grizzlies, they are really in it right now with the Spurs. The Jazz and Clippers, is hard to assess where they are right now because there's been so many injuries in that series. We have not seen them play, I don't think, one game at full strength yet with both of those squads, but I do know that the Jazz are a really good team. So if you say the Jazz are going to beat the Grizzlies, I wouldn't be mad at you, but I'm going to pick the Grizzlies here. I think their defense is very, very good. Mike Conley is one of the most underrated point guards in the NBA. I am moving the Grizzlies up here, but if you say Jazz right here, I won't be mad at you. That's extremely hard to call. Then you have the Raptors and Thunder. I think you're going to run into the same problem. Right now, you know, Russell Westbrook did his best to carry them past Houston, but they're going to get eliminated soon. And although, you know, again, I probably should learn my lesson about trusting the Raptors, they've bounced back against the Bucks, so I think they could handle the Thunder in the playoff series. Westbrook, he truly is a one-guy team out there. And then, of course, the Spurs have way too much talent and way too much just know-how of basketball to lose to the Blazers, so they're moving on. Now, this is the single most interesting part of this bracket, and it's that the predicted NBA Finals for this year, if we implemented the no conference rule, the Warriors would play the Cavaliers in the second round. Now, for some that would be a buzzkill, but again, it goes back to the product of the regular season. The Cavaliers proved they didn't give two shits about the regular season. They were resting players, they were, you know, clearly taking plays off on defense. They just did not care. They were ready for the playoffs. I bet you that would change if they knew that if they were the 8th or 9th best team in the NBA, that this would be the path to the NBA Finals, because this is almost impossible. You don't want the Warriors in the second round. So this improves the overall product of the regular season, which I know a lot of fans want to see. But anyways, if things go like they are now, where the Cavaliers defense is still kind of imperfect and the Warriors are where they are, and assuming everyone is healthy, yeah, the Warriors, they get that round against the Cavaliers, and now we've got a different NBA Finals. It is totally different this year. That's what it would look like in 2017. And you go down here, you get the Bucks and Clippers, and at this point, honestly, the Bucks, they are a somewhat of a breakout team. I mean, it's starting to look like the Raptors have adapted and they might eliminate them, but the Clippers, I just have no trust in the Clippers, honestly. I really don't. Like the first game, the Jazz lost Gobert. You were supposed to step on them and they didn't do that. They lost that game. So the Clippers to me are the better team on paper, but they've proved again and again and again that it just does not matter what's on paper for them. When it comes time to just get things done, like in 2015 against the Rockets, they just can't get things done in the playoffs. They really can't. So I would pick the Bucks. I would not trust the Clippers to go to a conference finals. They've never been there before. They've never proved to me that they can handle their business. I'm going Bucks there. Then you go down and you get the Rockets and Grizzlies. Now this is interesting because this is a very possible matchup in today's NBA actually. Even if, you know, the next series is supposed to be the Rockets and Spurs, and the Spurs right now are tied with them, and just like I said, Grizzlies are giving them hell, so we might see this. And if it does happen, the Grizzlies have a really good chance to eliminate them. Again, this could go either way because the Rockets have that blazing offense, but you know, the Grizzlies, they have such good defense that they're even giving the Spurs a tough time. So in a series, I would go Grizzlies over the Rockets. You know, if that series actually does happen, I'll go more in depth about why, but you know, these are just hypotheticals right now, so I'm going with the Grizzlies there. Just so you know though, I believe the Rockets do have a chance in that series, but Grizzlies are every bit as good as I sold them to be. And then you have the Raptors and Spurs, and if I picked the Raptors to beat the Spurs, I would have to pick them to beat the Cavaliers next round, and I don't think that's going to happen. Neither one of those would happen. You know, I will give the Raptors credit for one thing. They were disappointing me when they came into this playoffs, but they have shaped up and they've taken command of this series. I think it's 3-2 right now, if they actually won that game and didn't blow the lead as I'm recording this. So even though I am seeing some maturity from the Raptors in that spot, I still don't think that they're good enough to beat some of the top dogs in the NBA. I would go Spurs in that series. So that would bring us to, well, not the conference finals. I guess you call it the third round, I guess, in this, because there are no conference finals. Now, in this, in the year 2017, some of the years this would have been better, but this is kind of a buzzkill because the Cavaliers are gone now. On this side, you would get the Warriors and Bucks. Now, even if if you disagree with me and you say you're crazy, Dom, the Clippers could beat the Bucks, you know, whatever. If you trust the Clippers, you can put the Clippers there too. I think either of those teams lose to the Warriors. Obviously, I said in my conference predictions video, the Clippers haven't beaten the Warriors in like 10 straight games or something like that. They haven't beaten them since like 2015. So if you want to put them there, sure. But yeah, the Bucks, I don't think they would beat the Warriors either, and I don't think you seriously think they would either. So obviously the Warriors. And again, in this kind of playoff bracket, this is just the advantage of having the #1 seed. You get the easiest route because if you look at all the teams on that part of the bracket that could have made the third round, it was between the Celtics, the Bucks, the Clippers, and the Hawks. The Warriors, they could kill all of them. Now, I will say in a regular year, their second round matchup against the Cavaliers, it probably wouldn't be the Cavaliers, right? Because the Cavaliers, they're better than the 8th place team. I think we all know that. This would be pretty much a straight shot for the Warriors into the NBA Finals, and maybe it's just because it's the Warriors again with Kevin Durant and Curry and all that. There's really not a whole lot anybody could do against that. But that #1 seed is very valuable in this type of setup. It's not like where you have the Western Conference now, and you know, in the years past in the Western Conference, even if you had the 1 seed, it kind of didn't matter because everybody in that conference was tough to play. So this kind of changes that a little bit. You kind of get rewarded for your play during the regular season. And on the other side of the bracket, this is interesting. I want to talk about this. The first round in the Western Conference playoffs right now would actually be the conference finals, and rightfully so. So that's one of the drawbacks of the system we have right now is when you have a conference like the West, and in previous years, especially when it was very strong, a lot of the series that really shouldn't happen into the conference finals, they were happening in the first round. So that specifically happened with the Clippers and the Spurs, and that was sort of a product of the division rule that they actually got rid of, but that was also a product of just having so many powerful teams in one conference. And that's stupid because when you have that many good teams in one conference, you know, obviously that can't happen for both conferences. That's why you need this top 16 bracket, because then a series right now like the Spurs and Grizzlies, which is absolutely the best series in the playoffs right now, you would get that in the third round like you're supposed to. But because of the way it's set up today, one of these teams is going to knock each other out, and that's just not really fair, you know? I don't think that some teams should have it easier than the others just because of where they play, what conference they play in. But then again, you have to figure out the travel time, and that's something I don't really know how to fix yet myself. Anyways, in this series, I would stick with what I predicted. I said that the Spurs were going to win in 6, and right now that can still happen because the series is 2-2. The Grizzlies are every bit as gritty as I said they would be. As a matter of fact, I think I may have actually picked the Spurs in 7 games, which I think that might happen. That really might happen, but I'm still going Spurs because Kawhi channeled his inner Mamba the other night, and he really deserved that win. So that would give us an NBA Finals of Golden State and the San Antonio Spurs. So what most of us expect, or at least are thinking, is going to be the Western Conference Finals would actually be the NBA Finals. And if you look at most years, if I were to go back and do this throughout the years of the playoffs, I think that's what you would find. You would find that the NBA Finals in most years would actually be what the Western Conference Finals turn out to be. So, you know, just go ahead and take that for what you will. Anyways, I've been all through this in my Western Conference video. I think that the Warriors are the better team, and I would pick them in that series. So if you want to know the whole breakdown of why, you can go see that. So here's the full bracket for you guys. If the 2017 NBA playoffs featured the rule that I wanted to feature, where there's just no conferences, it would come out looking something like this. Of course, some of these are probably interchangeable, but this is about what you would get. Again, this is somewhat of an outlier year because the Cavaliers are clearly not an 8th seed in the NBA. They're way better than that on paper, and we've seen them be better than that. And then you look at the Warriors too. Them having Kevin Durant just kind of throws a lot. It throws a lot out of whack because I don't think in previous years we've had a team that was just basically like the all-star team, and there was nobody else in the NBA who could really touch them. There were just so few teams in there, so that kind of throws it out of whack a little bit. It would be a little bit more interesting if you were to do the same format throughout previous years. You know, it would be a bit more interchangeable, I believe. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. Hope I gave you an idea of what it might look like if the NBA ever changes that rule, which they won't, so don't get your hopes up. Anyways, if you liked the video, hit like, comment, subscribe, and definitely hit the bell next to my name if you want notifications on my video. I'm Dom2K, and I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.